Hello, and welcome to my YouTube channel and podcast, Reading Little Blue Books Out Loud. This is a little blue book. It just happens to be Little Blue Book number 846, and it is titled Womanhood, The Facts on Life Revealed to Women, written by Gloria Goddard. And this is copyright 1920 something, so. This is part 3, and we left off near the top of page 27, and the next chapter is The Child Problem. The natural purpose of mating is to beget children. The original scheme of nature is built around this fact, but nature had no hand in planning civilization, large cities, and our present economic standards. It is all very well to say that people are going contrary to the plans of nature in refusing to have children, and that this is a sin. Poverty is a sin. The struggle for existence is a sin. And since there are part and parcel of our living today, it is often better to add the so-called sin of refusing to have children to the list than to commit a more heinous offense by bringing small lives into the world without having the adequate means to provide for them. No human being has an ethical right to bring children into the world unless he can provide healthy surroundings and all of the normal advantages. Those who rant against socialism and the insubordination of the working classes, and who spend large sums of money in a vain endeavor to keep these less fortunate individuals from rising against wealth, would do better if they spent that money in preaching against too many children, and in teaching men and women how to limit their families to their means. If the poor were not largely sex ignorant, and were not overridden by religious superstition, they would not have such families and would stand some chance of improving their condition. A working man with a dozen children stands very little chance of raising himself out of the squalor in which he was born. Give the same man 1 or 2 children, and his energies would be spent in learning more, in rising, instead of in the everlasting enervating struggle for enough bread to feed the 2 profuse mouths. The children would have a greater chance. 2 children put through high school and infinitely more valuable to the state and the family than a dozen who are forced into sweatshops before they are old enough to leave off playing dolls. Here is where the women of today may help. Those who give an intelligent interest in politics can, if they will, help the passage of bills that will allow for sex education and that will teach families not to have more children than they can decently support. The general idea that all women want children is an absurd fallacy. Most women have them because they do not know how to prevent it. Certainly, the average man, given his choice, would not elect to have a number of children, so that he could have the privilege of slaving away his days to feed them. Nor need the pessimist fear that this will lead to race suicide. The average couple is glad enough to have 2 or 3 children, provided they can support them adequately. If some of the economic load of the present were lifted by a wise state legislation, most married persons would be glad to raise a small family. It is the strain of too many children that wears out the parents, and that reduces each child's chance for a happy, useful life. Moral codes. The double code of morality is one of the most insidious weeds of our man-made civilization. By this code, man is forgiven all of his social sins, women none. This code has been rigidly enforced down to the last 20 years and is still largely favored in many places. This amazing code allowed, rather expected, every young man to sow his wild oats before his marriage. His escapades, provided they were carried on so as not to appear too brazen, were condoned and frequently encouraged. But when he came to marry, regardless of how many unsavory affairs he had indulged in, he demanded, and society backed him in this demand, a pure, unsophisticated girl. Women, on the other hand, were required to be absolutely pure and innocent, else their value as wives was gone. It was instead that the young girl sit by the fire and sew a fine seam until some man came with the offer to transfer her to his fireside to continue the seam. If, as too frequently occurred, no man came, she must decline into a sour spinsterhood, and give her energies to care of the sick or church suppers, with a sweet smile, while her victuals were gnawed by the malignant cancer of ingrowing love-longing. Any girl who by the slightest gesture stepped a fraction of an inch from this allotted way was immediately damned, and was thenceforth not a fit mate for any nice man. But the prey of all men. If a girl yielded to the unmarried love, the river or prostitution were the delightful alternatives offered her, and men and women united in maligning her. Superstitiously, the men changed their maledictions from the waning light of day. Needless to say, since the human animal is removed by degree rather than kind from his four-footed ancestors, there was a great demand for prostitutes. Men could not satisfy their urge toward variety among the women of their class, so they devised a system whereby they could keep their women virtuous and still enjoy the fruits of passion. The prostitute was allowed to carry on her tragic trade, but was thrust into the lowest depths of degradation. With women's rising importance in the economic world, this double standard will cease. Already it is showing signs of age. Women has traded the fragility of the hothouse rose for the sturdier wind-blown beauty of the wild rose, and she has not suffered for it. The old legend that men admired only the shy, retiring girl has been shattered. The business girl is not left to sit at home in the evening while her more simple sister is wooed. Far from it. Men are anxious to win the favor of these new women, nor do they seek for ignorance in them, nor decline to marry them when they discover their knowledge of life. The modern girl who accepts a friendship if she wishes one has no difficulty in finding a permanent mate when she desires to. The time will come when the double code is but an unpleasant memory of an incomplete civilization. Women has the choice. It is more probable, and will be infinitely more beneficial to the race, that she will choose a single standard, whereby men and women may be monogamous.